Hello, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening for Disability, Equity, and Equality, a panel discussion brought to you tonight by the Minister of Social Development and Seniors, Minister Tanae Furbett. We also have a great group of panelists. We have Alicia Zhu, paraeducator. We have Sherry Lynn Lilly, mental health counselor. We have Thea Furbett, chairwoman and co-founder of Tomorrow's Voices. We have Keith Simmons also joining us a bit later. He's an accessibility officer. And we have Margaret Phillips, principal of Dame Marjorie Bean Hope Academy, who's also been with us before. So we want to say good evening to you this evening. Good evening to our panel. Good evening to our audience. We want to make sure that our audience can contribute your questions and your comments. So please feel free to join in the discussion. And Minister Furbett, I'm turning it over to you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Dana. I just want to say good evening to everyone and thank you for joining us this evening for this very important topic that we have. Our topic this evening is disability, equity, and equality. We're looking forward to having a discussion in regards to this topic. I was speaking earlier to Nikita Robinson on the radio this afternoon when I was talking about the program that we were having this evening. And I was speaking to Bermuda's level of readiness, particularly for this topic. And I believe that when our people are ready to make movement in a certain area, that we will and shall have more buy-in. And I think that it is important that we continue to have conversations in this capacity, opening up this area to everyone in Bermuda, and not only in Bermuda, but globally as well. For those persons who don't know, it's actually a global disability summit happening this week. I believe it was the 16th, 17th, and I believe it's the 18th as well. So this discussion panel falls in line with what's happening globally as well. We are all in this human experience together, and it is important whether or not you identify with exceptionalities, differently abled, different abilities, whichever definition you or person with disability, whichever definition you relate to. I believe that we all come with our differences and our exceptionalities. Some you may see, some you may not see. I think that it is important that we recognize that there are disabilities that you can see and cannot see. I just wanted to share there are some key facts that we should know as a country. Over 1 billion people live with some form of disability, and this is globally. The number of people with disabilities are dramatically increasing, and this is due to demographic trends and increases in chronic health conditions, among other causes. Almost everyone is likely to experience some form of disability, whether it's temporary or permanent at some point in life. People with disabilities are disproportionately affected, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic. When people with disability access healthcare, they often experience stigma and discrimination and receive poor quality services. There is an urgent need to scale up disability inclusion in all levels of our health system, particularly primary healthcare, but not only in our healthcare system, in many other systems that we encounter. So I just wanted to share those key facts. And again, welcome this evening. We are looking forward to having a fruitful discussion in this area. There is no right or wrong answer, no right or wrong way to go with this discussion, with our discussion. We will keep in mind sensitivities, of course, but we do have a wide range of panel members. I just also wanted to mention that Lisa Reed from Human Rights Commission was to join us this evening, but is unable to. So we do have Sarah Clifford with us this evening, who can assist with questions as it relates to anything related to the Human Rights Commission or Human Rights Act. So welcome, Sarah. And welcome everyone. We are actually going to go ahead and get started. Each panel member will have about 5 minutes to share with you information that they have that they would like to share with the community. And it is definitely along the topic areas of equity, equality, inclusion, discrimination. So we are going to go ahead and get started with Miss Alicia Zul. Miss Zul, do you want to get started for us?
Yes, thank you, Minister. Good evening, panelists and TV. I'm going to start off with discrimination. Under the Bermuda Human Rights Commission Act, under Section 17A of the Act, for the purposes of this act, a person shall be deemed to discriminate against another person if he treats him less favorably than he treats or would treat other persons generally, or refuses or deliberately omits to enter into any contract or arrangement with him on the like terms and the like circumstances as in the case of other persons, generally or deliberately treats him differently to other persons because of his disability. An employer, potential employer, may not differentiate in the treatment of a disabled employee based that individuals in disability. This means that disabled individuals are to be provided the same opportunities as non-disabled individuals in all areas, including work, services, and facilities, and in respect of the provision of goods and services. I'm going to touch on direct discrimination. This happens when someone treats you less well than another person who doesn't have a disability, and the other person's circumstances and abilities are the same as or very similar to yours. There is no defense to direct disability. Okay, here is direct disability. Discrimination by association. This protects your family and friends from direct discrimination because you or someone close to you has a disability. For example, you need to make up some work hours that you missed when you took your son to a medical appointment for his epilepsy. Your employer is not flexible in the way you can make up the work hours. However, your colleague takes her son, who does not have epilepsy, to a doctor's appointment. Your employer is very flexible in the way she can make up her hours. Could you please check if this is a supposition or conclusion? How can we avoid discrimination? Promote greater diversity. Do we have a policy of diversity that is well entrenched, long term, and unlikely to change, as well as the relevant legislation pertaining to persons with exceptionalities? This will be serious in the area of education, including territory, employment, housing, etc. While government could lead the way by enacting such legislation, companies that actively promote inclusion for people with exceptionalities can be considered as trailblazers and be supported as such. This would require advocacy, awareness, as unfortunately, people with exceptionalities are among the most unrepresented in society, especially here in Bermuda. It is as if they do not exist of the lack of understanding that people with exceptionalities have many capabilities and want to be given some opportunities as their peers. Indirect discrimination, victimization. This is when somebody treats you less well than other people because you have complained of disability, discrimination, or they treat you less well because you have helped someone else to complain about disability discrimination. Example, you are not invited to the office social events because you supported a colleague when they complained about discrimination at work. The next one we'll touch on is indirect discrimination. Harassment. This happens when somebody behaves towards you in a way you don't want, such as taunting or bullying, and the behavior has the purpose or effect of violating your dignity, failing to treat you in a respectful way, or creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating, or offensive environment for you. Your employer has a duty to protect you from harassment by the people you work with. If your colleagues bully you because of your disability, your employer may be considered responsible for this. Example, you suffer from dyslexia. Your colleagues make abusive and insulting comments about you and your reading ability. This could count as harassment. Indirect discrimination. Failure to make a reasonable adjustment. Sometimes people or organizations may need to make a reasonable adjustment to respect of your disability. This is to make sure that you are not put at a substantial advantage to other people just because you have a disability. Failure to make this adjustment could be illegal. The person or organization that has the duty to make the adjustment is not allowed to pass any cost of making them onto you. Reasonable adjustments can include making changes to a rule, requirement, or practice, making changes to buildings or premises, providing equipment that will help you. Example, an employer could allow you to start and finish work later than other employees if you usually have seizures as a result of your epilepsy first thing in the morning, provided this fits in with their working practices. Thank you. I'm going to finish off there with indirect discrimination.
Thank you, Alicia, for that quite involved description of what discrimination can look like in many different forms. And the examples were perfect. It gets people to understand or it gives a better picture in regards to what discrimination can look like. So thank you for sharing that information. We're going to move right along with Ms. Phillips, Margaret Phillips, who's going to give us some information in regards to disability and education. So welcome, Ms. Phillips.
Good afternoon, Minister, and thank you for the opportunity to share. Good afternoon, panelists and Bermuda. I am going to be speaking from the background of Dame Marjorie Bean Hope Academy and persons in our community possibly with severe, profound, multiple learning disabilities or involvement. As a backdrop, Dame Marjorie Bean is a member of the Bermuda public school system, and we serve students ages 4 through 18 and sometimes older with permission, that is, who have multiple learning disabilities and complex care needs. Another term of reference is intellectual or developmental disabilities. And at our school, we find students there with varied anomalies. And we work through an adapted curriculum, which is planned with the input of parents and all stakeholders. We have teachers, paraeducators, therapists inside within our building, and then we also work with outside agencies if needed to plan a focused and targeted program for our students to ensure that they can attain their maximum potential. With the advancement of medicine, we are finding that in 2008, the CDC reported a prevalence rate of persons with significant disabilities of 1 in 6. And they estimated then that the prevalence rate could increase. And I have, in my experience, found that what you don't understand, you're likely able to sometimes shy away from and not. People respond differently to things that they don't know. And I hope that with this opportunity, we would be able to shed some light on ways that the community can come alongside to work with families and persons with significant disabilities to help them to fulfill their maximum potential. Because one of the core beliefs that we do have at Hope Academy is that every single child there, every student, every young adult that is at Hope Academy can learn. Every graduate that we have produced at whatever level is able to contribute in some way to the Bermuda public school system and to the wider community. And so at school, we work through the adaptations, as I mentioned. We have some of them are doing developmental skills. So we're looking at learner readiness opportunities for them. And we are looking at helping to shape pro-social skills with them. We're looking at activities of daily living. We're looking at pre-vocational and recreational skills training to help them to be able to manage. And as a school, we are tasked by the Ministry of Education to ensure that we put things in place to provide an equitable, because that's the mission of the ministry, to provide equitable education for our students. And what does equitable mean? It means different things for different students, because what I may need in order to be able to access my environment and be able to understand what a teacher is saying may not be what my classmate may need. So and I look forward to continuing this conversation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And hopefully we can have the opportunity to speak a little bit more in regards to things that Dame Marjorie Bean Hope Academy has done to make sure that students are included in the classroom setting. So we can probably get into that a little bit later. We're going to move along with Ms. Thea Ferbert, who is here not only representing Tomorrow's Voices, but also as a parent of a child with some very great abilities, right, Thea?
Yes, that's what he would say anyway.
Yeah, that's what he would say.
Thank you, Minister, for inviting me to be a part of this panel, and as well as the panelists. I'm very happy to be a part of this. Tonight, I'm going to just speak about kind of the journey I've had with Saray regarding disability, equity, and equality. So I'm the co-founder of Tomorrow's Voices, and I'm a graphic designer by trade, and I have owned my business for 15 years. But the best part of me is that I'm the mother of a funny, loving, stubborn, cheese bowl eating 24-year-old son named Saray, whom happens to have a significant disability as well as other comorbidities. Tonight's topic, disability, equity, and equality, have played a large role in my life in raising Saray for the past 23 years. I say 23 years because Saray was as when he was one, he was typically developing. He spoke, he said mama, he said daddy. It was a fun, loving child. And after 1 year old, he lost all speech. He went into himself, and he was a different child. And that started kind of the journey of where we were with regards to Saray being diagnosed with a disability. So this is where equity and equality came into the picture on our journey. Equity meaning equality meaning each individual or group is given the same resources or opportunities. And then equity, recognizing that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach each equal outcome. So who would have had the thought or definition of these two words would have such impact on my life, would get me to his needs and a better quality of life? To make this a bit clearer, for everyone imagine, when Saray was born, he was typically development. So he was on par with his peers, everyone was at the same level. Once he developed a disability, his place on that line went lower. So he was down here and his peers were up here. So he no longer was equal. So every day we had to claw our way up to try to get him back in line with his peers, and knowing full well that to make it in this world, to be self-sufficient and to have a great quality of life, he would need a whole lot of equity to pass that line. So you see, every parent has has a child with a disability, always has this sentence in their head. It's the sentence that keeps us up at night with worry and stress. This sentence is, what will happen to my child when I am no longer on this earth? That sentence rules every part of our existence as a family, because each family knows that they have a limited amount of time on this earth, and to ensure that their child with a disability has a fighting chance at some sort of happy, healthy, and safe future, there's a lot of work to be done to get there. So here's where equality and equity come slamming into the picture. Saray's diagnosis. Saray got diagnosed in Boston's Children's Hospital because Bermuda didn't have those services. So we went to Boston, and it took a week of testing, every test you can think of. And then at the end of the week, the developmental pediatrician said he had autism. And I had never even heard of the word before. But the pediatrician said if he lived here, he would start services immediately. Well, unfortunately, he did not live in Boston, and so we had to get back on a plane and come back to Bermuda. In preschool, Saray, when he first stepped into the preschool, he was quickly identified as needing more support, and there wasn't any available. So between myself and the charity Project 100, we put an ad in the paper and conducted interviews to pay a support person to be with Saray in preschool. This was okay, but when the equity and equality part was that everyone in the school, including the para, the support person, didn't understand and know what autism was either. And so they were compassionate and loving, but they couldn't push forward his life in a meaningful way. And then we got to public school, primary and middle. And to be honest, those were challenges as well. It was always us trying to figure out everything instead of everyone already knowing anything. And so when you have a child with a disability, you want to walk into an environment and know that everyone who you're walking into has an idea of how to provide services for your child. So equity was very limited. and we continue to have challenges in this environment. But the story gets a little better. Tomorrow's Voices, the place that made a difference in Soraya's development. When I saw real developmental milestones assessed, addressed, and mastered. Yes, I may be a co-founder of Tomorrow's Voices, and you all might be saying, well, she is a part of it, so she's going to big them up anyway. But no, I am a parent first. And like any parent, I want the people that support my child to be understanding, compassionate, flexible, good listeners, and finally have to see Soraya as a human being worthy of the best services. And that's what I got, a partnership between my family and the clinicians at Tomorrow's Voices, with that ultimate goal of providing Soraya the quality of life he deserves. And for those with disabilities to gain equality, we must prepare for them before they are born or develop a disability. We shouldn't be running after people for wheelchair access or special teaching tools for success. They should already be woven into the fabric of our community and our culture. For those with disabilities to gain equity, we must recognize that we are not providing the tools to make meaningful change, and we must have the guts to do something about it. Equity is the key to the success of every person with a disability, and a norm that is deserved in our community and homes. In closing, I still do have those present thoughts while I lay in bed about what will happen with Soraya when I am no longer on this earth. Will there's cares and thoughts about him as a human? Will people think about him as needing support and recognize that he, even though he doesn't speak, that he can hear? I pray at the end of the night that disability, equity, and equality is something our community aspires to become, but something that already exists. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thea. I formulated many questions in my head to ask you, but we're going to move right along because I want to make sure that everyone gets in their content this evening. Unfortunately, Keith is still having a bit of... Keith, I was just talking about you. I was saying he was having some technical difficulty, and then you popped up on the screen. Look at that.
Yeah. Good evening, Minister. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Bermuda.
But you popped up just in time because it's your turn to speak. Should I give you a minute or?
No, I missed the beginning, but I guess I can go.
Okay, perfect.
Just good evening to everyone again. I don't know the intro, but my name is Keith Simmons. I'm the Accessibility Officer at Aging and Disability Services, formerly the National Office for Seniors and Physically Challenged, and I've been there since October 4th, 2004. So I put a bit of time in government and also out in the field. Tonight, primarily, I'll speak about accessibility and transporting, housing, and areas like that. Access, I don't know if any of the ladies or anybody else explained that access is not just to the built environment, but it's giving persons access to housing, transport, education, access to technology, whatever they might require, depending on what their disability is. So at Aging and Disability Services, we have a staff of, 8 now, that's run by the manager, Ms. Kian of Alberta. We have a program manager, Sarah DeLassio, a case manager supervisor, Shayna Smith, and we have case managers, Alicia Martinez, Rukia Brown, Jackie Bennett, and Robin Kelly. And also we have Jakia Burden, who's our administrative assistant. And congratulations to her and everyone that just graduated from Bermuda College and her cohort team. I believe it's 10 or 12 of them. That we will now have 12 Bermudian nurses that just graduated from the college. I do a lot of work with planning department, a lot of developers, architects. Just this afternoon before coming on here, I was in meetings with the architect and developer that hopefully a new hotel condo complex will come online within the next 2 years. So that's why I spend a lot of my time, and also assisting persons that might need a bit of assistance, parking permits, housing assessments for access them to enter the houses, maybe after RTA, road traffic accident, or different areas like that. But it's pretty exciting. Sometimes you really, really have to fight, but I would really like to say, thank you to the choir. And the choir, I mean by our families, volunteers, the professionals that work with persons like myself with present disabilities, everyone that is on our side, that walks beside us to assist us to survive on a daily basis, to be part of society. We have a lot of members with disabilities that are, they work. They are a very meaningful part of society. They add a lot to society. And I'd like to thank everyone that helps us, and walks beside us to advocate for us. It means a lot for us to move forward. Just today, again, talking about transport, the new buses not accessible, but yes, we knew about the infrastructure. Hopefully, we've had meetings over the years on paratransit systems. Hopefully, that comes online very soon. Yes, we have budget restraints, but hopefully these things happen. We need it badly. People are paying a lot of money for transport that really can't afford it, unlike others that can just jump on a bus for $4 or a special person's card and stuff like that. So, within Asian Disability Services, we fight every day. We have a very dedicated team, and like a lot of other offices that we collaborate with, there's a lot of dedicated people out there. Is there anything that I missed, Minister, or that you want me to continue?
No, I think that that's good. I think the discussion about transportation is a huge one. Even mentioning about the buses that are recently coming on board and not being accessible. There are many reasons why those buses are not, quite a good fit for stopping at every stop. There are many sort of obstacles, where bus stops line up against persons' houses, or they're lined up against walls, and so it would make it very challenging for our regular bus route to be accessible for persons with wheelchairs. So we are looking into a paratransit system in which transportation can come right to someone's door. And so we have still lots of work to do in that particular area, but that is definitely a much area of need. And we'll move right along to Ms. Sherry Lynn Lilly, who will wrap us up with our panel discussion this evening. However, we will be taking questions and we'll be having discussions should time permit. So go ahead, Sherry. Welcome. You have to take yourself off of mute, Sherry.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Minister Tanae, for inviting me tonight, and to my panelists. I am already moved. I'm trying to contain myself actually at this moment. And to all the listeners in Bermuda, there are people that are listening from overseas as well that I know, because I certainly made sure to invite people to hear what is happening in Bermuda. I am a Bermudian who lives overseas. I am a woman that is completely blind, but landed in the United States shortly after high school, went to work academy, and landed in the United States quite by accident, and ended up staying, which ended up being a real blessing. I see it now as kind of divine order. So had I not accidentally landed here, which is a story in and of itself, most likely I would have never left Bermuda, because where I fell in kind of the scheme of social economics in Bermuda, I would not have had the means to leave Bermuda to come overseas. And so this conversation tonight is extremely, extremely important. In the summer of 2018, I did return home for a visit. And it was the first time that I had returned home as a fully blind person. I have been legally blind my entire life, but have been totally blind for about 10 years. And when I came home in 2018, I had the privilege of sitting with a small group and just having a conversation. It was supposed to be a larger event, but something happened and a few turned out, but that was all I needed. And as I talked with this small group of people, along with being home on vacation for 2 weeks as a fully blind woman, I began to encounter the challenges that a lot of my panelists have already addressed this evening. And so talking with this small group of people who also happen to be visually impaired, I left Bermuda with a burden. And I came back and I fought not to respond, because I felt like I had so much on my plate already as a graduate student at the time, but it wouldn't go away. And so I had to respond. And so I contacted these young women, these who were already prodding me to respond. And so from there, Inspired Bermuda was born, which is our charity whose motto is advocating for an equitable society. And immediately I went to praying, because I was like, okay, who am I? Haven't lived at home since I left. Had been coming back and forth forever, but this was a completely different experience. And so we responded by coming out into the community and presenting the idea that legislation would be such an amazing, incredible thing in Bermuda. And so we looked at legislation, education, and support as our three-pronged model of advocacy response to the challenges that people with disabilities face every day in Bermuda. And I just felt like, to whom much was given, much was required. We had such a wonderful response that we just kept pushing forward, and we spent the first year collecting data. I just went up and down the streets of Bermuda. I talked to everybody that would listen. I sat with Kiona Balboa. I was privileged to sit with Tanae Furbert before she was minister and have awesome conversations about what an equitable society could look like in Bermuda. And having lived in the United States, I used to say that I was privileged. But I used to say that based on the misunderstanding that as a person with what I prefer to call an exceptionality, that somehow I felt privileged to have equality. And so I don't say that anymore, right? So I realized that in Bermuda, it's not a privilege to have equality. It is a matter of dignity. It is a matter of belonging. It is a matter of equity. And equity is an outflow of equality. So after we provide all of the resources so that everyone feels equal, then we take into consideration such social structures as gender and race and socioeconomic status and ability. And then we're able to respond by leveling the playing field, which doesn't mean a flat playing field, as I believe it was Ms. Zoul so eloquently described. It just means making sure that everybody has the resources they need to have access. And so it became our mission and our goal to start pushing toward legislation. And that culminated in the summer of 2019 with a meeting with the premier, where we were able to share our vision. And the one main question, he had several small ones that he asked, he said, Sherry, why legislation? And I answered to say that as a person with a disability, I matter. What I bring to the table matters, right? It's more than inclusion, meaning I'm opening a door. No, it's meaning that what I bring to the table is equally as valuable as the person next to me who is other abled or fully abled. And so it is amazing and awesome, right? When we think about where does Bermuda stand, right, in terms of the rest of the world when it comes to disability rights, as opposed to just services. And that's not to say, as I speak in generalities, right, because we're talking about disabilities across the spectrum, that's not to say that the services that are already being provided, Hope Academy, right, Aging and Disability Services, WinReach, and many, many others that I probably don't even know of, aren't doing an amazing job. It's saying that the fight starts with the entire community and the entire society accepting and seeing a person with a disability as an equal. So buzzwords are just buzzwords until we are somehow able to implement enforceable legislation to protect those of us who live with disabilities or exceptionalities. Then the fight looks very, very different. And so as we press on, as we press forward, right, looking at what it's going to take to actually have equality and equity, it becomes very important that all of the stakeholders, it's not just government, it's community, it's family, it's organizations, it's churches, it's you and it's me, that has to come together to make sure that we are creating equity in an implementable and enforceable way. So I am so honored to be in the room with those of you who are actually residing in Bermuda, living with these challenges every day. Ms. Ferbert, you are a champion. You are a superhero. But not every person in Bermuda who has a child with a disability knows how to access outside resources, but also their own internal ability to fight for what their child may need. So this is where legislation becomes the anchor and the foundation for where all other services should outflow. And so thank you so much, Minister, for having me. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the conversation.
Thank you, Sherry. Very powerful in your explanation of equity and equality. And I hope that everyone that's listening was able to understand what that looks like a little bit differently. I want to mention one of the first things that I encountered when I first became Mr. It was a parent who reached out to me because they were trying to get their child to be, and please excuse me, Bermuda being so small, it can be so difficult to share stories, but I don't think that the parent would mind. They were trying to get their child into an after-school program, and they also had another sibling at the same school in which they attended, and because the one of the siblings had a disability, they were being challenged with not being able to attend the same after school program as the other sibling. And it was just interesting in how it evolved, because it was a perception of the first person in which that parent was in contact with to right away say that we don't offer that service. And that is the first obstacle that someone would have to encounter, because they don't understand what fairness and what equality looks like. For one sibling to attend and have access to a particular service, the other sibling who has a disability to be told they don't have access, that is not equity or equality. And so we had to have many conversations, and I'm so very thankful for other persons who helped out and assisted with making sure that the sibling was able to attend the same after-school program as the other sibling. So are we making progress is my question. And if we can start there with the panelists, we have I'm sure Thea, you can speak to whether or not we've made any progress. And I say that to you, Thea, because when you spoke about being a parent and wanting to provide a service for your child and children like your child and young adults like your child, that had to have come with fear. That had to have come with, are people going to accept this?
Mhm.
What sort of connections do I need to make? What extensive research do I have to do to make sure that this works for a segment of our community? And so if you could speak to that, what progress have we made? Because I would say that program wasn't there before. And now
Yeah, yeah. We've made progress. I mean, Tomorrow's Voices is 15 years in October. So of course we've made progress. And I think a lot of the services that Bermuda has have grown to have some inclusivity for people with disabilities. Like Sherry Lynn said, legislation is key. That is the backbone. That is the outline that others can follow to see if what they are providing is enough. And I just don't think that people, because this is what it is. It's people. It's you may have a disability, you may not have a disability, but you are a human being and you have the rights to everything that your neurotypical peer has as well. So I think we have made progress, but the backbone is legislation, because it gives you the power to have a book, to have in writing what's right, what's wrong. It gives people accountability, and so legislation is key. And then also, but I do think that Bermuda has grown in its community of understanding. It is the action that I think has to grow.
Thank you, Thea, for sharing that. I do want to jump to Sarah while we do have her here with us in regards to our human rights legislation, which is probably the only piece of legislation in which we have that would assist with discrimination around disability. Sarah, the Human Rights Commission gives Bermuda a terminology of what disability means and what it embraces. I know that we are looking forward to making some updates to the Human Rights Act. But if you can speak to what sorts of things come to the commission in regards to discrimination.
Thank you. And again, apologies from Lisa Reed, our executive officer. She will be with us for the next session. And thank you to the panelists and for the testimony shared this evening. I wanted to refer to, I believe one of the panelists already spoke to the inherent dignity of every single member of our community. And the Human Rights Act begins with a reference to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It actually begins with the reference to inherent dignity and the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family. And I wanted to emphasize just how significant that is as a guidepost. It should be underpinning our actions as individuals, but in particular, driving policy, driving programming, ensuring that anything we develop and wish to support has everyone in mind. As you referenced, Minister, the experience of being human is vast. The spectrum is wide, and we are falling short, most certainly. The Human Rights Act and the Human Rights Commission, I should say, is founded to administer the Human Rights Act that has been in place since 1981. Disability protection has actually been present in our Human Rights Act since 1984. There have been some advances in terms of reasonable accommodation, which, thank you, Mrs. Uhl, captured very clearly. And so there are incremental developments, but nonetheless, the task of bringing the Human Rights Act to life is collective and urgent. And every single individual that comes forward has a unique experience, and often one that we would never wish to see repeated. And so having redress and having an avenue for individual complaints is critical. So we are a complaint handling authority as well as a dispute resolution authority. We want to ensure that we can learn and advance understanding together based on all of our protected grounds. And while the Act is one avenue, it is important to, as has been emphasized so clearly this evening, to expand that legislative protection. And so we will see a full gamut of complaints based on disability in the areas of either employment, the 3 areas of protected areas under the Human Rights Act: employment, goods, facilities, and services, and accommodations. So it is not, it does not protect people from the experience, or the impact, I should say, of discrimination and harassment, right? So unfortunately, that regardless of the outcome of a complaint or an intake, that impact is still there. And so we see folks coming forward who are being marginalized or feel they are being marginalized in the workplace based on any number of different abilities. I will say that COVID we've seen an uptick in people coming forward, feeling like anything that is mandatory, there needs to be exceptions. There needs to be accommodation and modifications to accommodate for the distinction of being human. I'm not sure if I've answered your question, or I could keep going, as you know, Minister Forward.
Yes, I want you to speak to what reasonable accommodation would look like, Sarah.
Sure. So a very exciting development under the Human Rights Act in 2012 was the Reasonable Accommodation Amendment, which really made it clear for employers to, outside of undue hardship, as it was termed, that there is a duty to provide reasonable accommodations, adjustments, opportunities for employees or potential employees to fulfill the duties of the job to the best of their ability. And that, it was interesting. That was many years of advocating for that amendment, and tremendous consultation with stakeholders across the island. And it has now been under the Human Rights Act, and an expectation for all employment now for almost 10 years. 10 years. It'll be 10 years. Goodness. And that is requires a level of trust, I would say, to engage in that process. It does require individuals who may need an accommodation to disclose that. And it's sort of a catch-22. If the environment doesn't feel safe, it can be very difficult to put forward a request such as accommodation for extra time or working from home, which interestingly COVID has made clear is very possible. But that was something that would come before us in the past. Maybe you need a modification with your computer, or maybe you need extra, more flexible working hours. If the possibility to become disabled is, it's something that can occur at any point. And so it becomes really critical that the space is safe enough to share whatever it is you might need. And even when you're not clear on what that is, the expectation is that there is, to the example that was raised before around the nursery, that there is opportunity to problem solve together, to identify what might aid you, and enhance the experience and the opportunity of having this individual in your workplace. So it's not necessarily an easy process, I think, because of the stigma that still exists, but it is a duty and an expectation that employers will engage in the process of allowing persons who may require certain accommodations to thrive in the workplace.
Thank you, Sarah. I think it's also important, Sarah, and you can let me know what you think, that it's Sherry Lynn and I were having the conversation about whether or not people know what to do. And I found it fascinating, particularly over this COVID-19 period and pandemic, when the public health regulations kicked in. We were creating all sorts of guides and guidelines that people should follow. And we did. We went online to see, oh, what can we do? What can we not do? Right. And that was a guide that we used to follow to see how we could make sure that we stayed safe. And I want to use that as an example because I do believe that people need guides, particularly in this area. Uh, Organizations should be having statements of commitment to non-discrimination. Organizations, businesses should have guidelines of how they will handle persons with disabilities, whether or not it's returning back to work after a significant health um, condition that they may have undergone, or setting up what it would look like for a child either first starting school or returning back to school after some sort of surgery. So there needs to be guidelines put in place so that people understand what that process and that journey is like for them. Sherry, you touched on that a bit when you were speaking to, I think it was Sherry or Thea, was speaking to being able to walk in a room and having that fabric already woven. And sometimes it's not that easy. And somebody made a comment earlier, I saw it pop up, where they said, you feel like you have to fight for everything and things should just come so easy. But sometimes it doesn't come easy because people do not understand, nor have they been exposed to what it should look like. And I think that is probably half our battle is people don't understand what it should look like. Sherry, can you speak to that a little bit more for us? You're on mute.
I'm on mute.
Share button, leave studio, implement or your comments, private chat, send button, search tab, toolbar, address and search bar edits, free screen, news site information, address and search panel regions, main region, more options, mute microphone button to activate, press enter.
No, you're still on mute. And I just wanted to mention, and I don't think Sherry minds, that if you hear the voiceover in the background, she is using technology to help her to navigate the system.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Awesome. StreamYard doesn't have their shortcuts attached where I could just do it with one button. So I have to tab through the whole menu. So there we go, a barrier, right? But yeah, Tanae, refresh the question.
The question was around, Thea had mentioned early in her presentation in regards to being able to walk into a room and knowing that everything is going to be set out for you. And I remember us having a conversation about
Yes.
persons just not knowing what to
Yes.
do and what to ask for.
Yeah.
And if you could just speak to that, but also the importance of self-identifying. And I think particularly in Bermuda, it can be very challenging and difficult for you to say, I have a challenge. I have a child that has challenges, because you don't want people to treat you any differently. And so I
Yes.
think, speaking to self-identification and what that could mean for access, but also understanding that people don't always know what to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. So part of the growth, right, around kind of accessibility, right? Accommodations, like these are all words, like they're words that have meaning, but they're not words that have really been in our mainstream vocabulary in Bermuda for a really long time. And also, as Sarah shared, the Human Rights Act and documents is very limited, because it has to be enforceable. And so when someone goes with a complaint of discrimination and the Human Rights Commission responds, although what's written on paper says that that's not allowed, if a person doesn't know what accommodation they need, if they don't know how to access that accommodation, and if the employer is also not know what they need or unwilling to provide it, then we're back at square one. So again, please forgive me, I'm going to harp on legislation all night. But again, the vocabulary, understanding what to ask for, right? So if, for example, when I work with the ladies that helped me to start Inspired Bermuda, all visually impaired, none of them are computer literate. Not only because maybe they can't type. That's the easy part. But what are the technologies out there? What have people been exposed to in terms of accommodations and technology and assistive technology and adaptive technology? So if they don't know what to ask for, then again, accommodations become just kind of a bit of a buzzword. And then in terms of what is referred to as disclosure, again, I will speak to the idea that for me living in the United States, I have an outward visual disability. So you can look at me, well, not if I don't have my cane, you won't know, right? But if I have my cane, you're going to be able to say, oh, she's blind. But one of the protections that has been afforded to me is to disclose when necessary and how I want to without the fear of any kind of repercussions. So for example, if I go on a job interview and I submitted a resume and I am otherwise qualified, when I get into that interview, they cannot ask anything about my disability unless it's for the purpose of accommodating me. So that is a legal protection that I have under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so again, disclosing, right, is the right of the individual to do it when and how they want to, but specifically in the case of really needing an assistive technology or a piece of equipment or machinery that's going to help them to live a quality life, then they should be able to freely disclose without fear of any type of a stigma or repercussions. And so this is where societally we have to come alongside and pull ourselves up and be that people with disabilities are not different. And we do offer, something to our community and to society. And so we shouldn't be fearful of having that disclosure. And so that comes with educating our community. It comes with changing mindsets around disability. And, Bermuda is, 400 plus, years in existence. And because these conversations are just happening now, we have to be willing to allow curiosity, disagreements, learning, and also there's just going to be some outright rejection of these ideas. But we have to be able to push through and look at where Bermuda aligns itself and measures up in terms of the urgency of this matter against the rest of the world. So we're progressive in a lot of other ways. Financially, we're a mecca, right? But when it comes to this population of Bermudians, we have to do something different about how we are bringing people into spaces and allowing them to feel like, not just feel, but know that they are valuable and that they belong. Self-sustaining, dignity, all of these things are qualities that we want every single Bermudian to be able to encompass.
Absolutely. I also believe that without legislation, we will not empower our people to do more. And I say that because we have the perspective for. I remember hearing someone talk about their visual impairment, and they said, "I can't work because I have a visual impairment." And I was like, wow, we really think that if we have a disability that we can't be part of a functional community and society, and we actually want to be able to empower people so that, you know, we know that every single one of us have abilities and skills to some capacity, and we all have to live in this human experience together. I just wanted to know, Dana, I know you're back there, whether or not there were questions from our listening audience, if there were any questions.
Hi, Minister. Yes, we did have a few questions come in. There was one particular question. Someone was asking the question about post-secondary schooling at Bermuda College for persons on the learning impaired spectrum. If we can have someone address that. Thank you.
I don't know if anyone has experienced has experience with Bermuda College, but
Yes, I have. I
Okay.
have, Minister. When I was working at Cedar Bridge Academy, I had discussions with it was Mr. Llewellyn Trott at the time. I was doing work experience, and we had some students that was interested in different trades. And at that present moment in time, and I don't know if it has changed, they do not have a program for persons to go there once they have finished high school. So I don't know if that has changed, but that has been a battle for a very long time, and having some type of program for our young adults attend the college.
And I would say that there are definitely some challenges there. They do have a accessibility program through student services. But again, the client or the student who attends has to be of a certain level for them to be able to progress through their programming. And so they definitely need more support in that area. The other piece that I've learned was in regards to the, oh my goodness, what's the test? The GED. The GED test, that you can take a GED test with accommodations and modifications. And I don't believe, I'm not sure, they can correct me whether or not that was being offered, that method was being offered through the college. But we do have a long way to go. We do have people there who are committed to seeing more progress in this area. And note the person who put up the comment in regards to Bermuda College. Again, when we spoke earlier about helping others to understand what it is that we need, I was able to, earlier last year, able to get 2 wheelchair users to be able to attend Bermuda College. But then they found challenges when they became, some of them became ill and they had to sit out for a while. So recognizing that there's things can happen and how, you know, we have to re-enter back in again, but definitely some support is needed there. I remember I had mentioned before that I worked for a college in which I was the graduate student for the student service office, and it was a center where students can come to use technology to assist them with getting their work done, or if they needed someone to be to scribe their work or do voice notes, or be their buddy walking around campus to attend class with. All of those services were available. And so you know, that is my wish and my vision for Bermuda, to be able to get there one day.
Minister, can you hear me?
Yes, Dana, was there another question?
This is Sherry.
Hi, Sherry. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
I just wanted to really quickly also say that I was able to visit Bermuda College on one of my trips home and sit with, I don't remember the young man's name, but he was responsible for their learning resources for students that had questions about accommodations, and to really demonstrate some of the technologies. And it's not specific, some of the technology I use is actually not specific only to blinds, but also it encompasses students who have processing issues. So some of the listening tools that I use, and other like dyslexia and those types of things. And we were scheduled to go back and then COVID hit. So I have been in touch also with Dr. Dorinda Green. And so we're going to continue that ongoing conversation to begin to assess. And again, I think that it's important that as we think about legislation, right, before we even get to putting anything on a book, it's really defining what some of these things need to look like. I went to college here, and I went as a blind adult. So I went to college at 43, right? And did my bachelor's program and did my master's program as a blind adult, and was able to utilize the Americans with Disabilities Act to walk into a disability service office, do an intake to say what my needs were, and then the college had to respond. Every professor then received a letter of accommodation that said, you have a student in your class, these are her accommodation needs, which included, I'll just give you one example, that all of my articles or documents or anything that they were going to give in writing had to be provided to me in a readable format, specifically for me. Readable format might mean one thing for me and something different for, let's say, a student who has dyslexia. So again, as we're pushing forward, words do matter, and how we define even disability, anchoring ourselves in a concrete definition of what that means, is also going to help us to be able to respond effectively to the needs of Bermudians living with disabilities.
Thank you, Sherry. Minister, we have a question that's come in from Erica Smith. She says, thank you so much for this discussion. Can anyone speak to whether the implementation of the payroll tax relief for employers to hire those with disabilities has resulted in more persons being employed? Has it had a positive impact? Are employment numbers increased? There's quite a bit going on in that. Maybe we can just approach one of those questions. We do have one more question after that before we start wrapping it up with the panel.
And thank you, Erica, for recognizing that that option is out there, particularly for, and highlighting that that option is out there for employees. I believe, I don't have the numbers. I will have to get that information and follow that information back up with you, whether or not it has actually increased the amount of persons with disabilities who would be employed. But I do know that persons with disabilities who are already employed definitely got to take advantage of that payroll tax relief. But I will get that answer for you. I can get that answer for you to see if there has been an increase in uptake in regards to the use of the waiver of the payroll tax. But thank you for bringing that up, because I want our listening public to know that that waiver exemption does exist when you hire somebody who has a disability. I also want to send a shout out to WinReach. I did see a comment from WinReach, and just say hello and thanks for watching this evening. There was another question, Dana?
Yes, this comes from Alana Doling, might be Alana Doling. Where is the Human Rights Act in reference for employers making adjustments for employees with disability? Sarah, I don't know if that's something that you want to touch on for us.
Sure. So you can find the Human Rights Act on humanrights.bm website or under Bermuda laws, under consolidated laws, and you'll find it in Schedule 1. So it's quite detailed and provides, it's under the title of undue hardship, which I'm not. I don't love because really it's slanted in the direction of the employer when, obviously the Human Rights Act is designed to uplift and reinforce the humanity of our community. And it's something we should be very proud of. So we want to leverage that as much as possible. But the reference you'll see is undue hardship currently under the legislation. And so it speaks to the duties of the employer. And I am going to include details so that should anyone have any further questions, please reach out to us at the Human Rights Commission. A significant part of our work is to engage and educate and learn from and with specialists and stakeholders in the community to advance the rights that are, and really leverage. As Sherry Lynn said, there is work to be done, and we do not have sufficient protection. And so we want to maximize what is there, and that comes from collective organization and communication around what our expectations are as a community. I think if we can rally around the expectation of the dignity and worth of all, it's a fantastic starting point.
I think that word there that you use, Sarah, in regards to being a collective is very important. I think, Thea, you would say so. Margaret, you would say so. Sherry, you would say so. Keith, you would say so. Alicia, you would say so, because so many things people fight for, it helps them personally, and it doesn't outreach to the entire community. Some of what we've been fought for does have outreach, but it definitely that working collaboratively and cohesively will definitely get us more progress. I just want to share that there are 3 documents that are out there. There's a national policy on disability. That is a document that is out there that was done so many years ago and probably needs updating, correct, Keith? But we also need an implementation plan to support that document as well, to help us make progress in this area, as well as legislation. But there is also 2 documents here. One is the Directory of Helping Services. If you Googled this, the Bermuda Government Directory of Helping Services, you can find this within our government web pages. And then also this document, which is a guide to benefits available to persons with disabilities in Bermuda. Again, if you Googled this document within our government web page, you should have access to this. It's just some useful information that I want our listening public to know that we have. So again, I just want to give everyone a minute to give us some closing remarks.
Yes,
and I
Minister,
want
could we just add one more thing to that? We
Sure.
do have a number of people that have joined in the discussion tonight online. So we do want to recognize and thank the public for being a part of the discussion and for submitting your questions and your comments. We haven't been able to get to all of them. We do want to note Ms. Keisha Wolf. She's actually submitted some comments about her experience at Bermuda College. So there are people that are submitting, the experiences that they have, and these are things that are definitely worth addressing in relation to this topic. But as we conclude, as you said, Minister, we want to go around and thank all of our guests and then finish with you, Minister, for the evening, as we are just about out of time.
Great. So we will do some closing remarks, and we can start with Margaret Phillips.
Thank you, Minister. And just to piggyback on what you said, we have been having conversations, and I have had the privilege of being a part of the school redesign process. And one of our taglines has become, everything begins with a conversation. And there are persons online. I'm so happy that I was able to participate with all of you, that you have been having conversations, and I would encourage the collective, and I would encourage it happening at the early stages as well. We spoke a lot about the end stage, the employability, what happens when persons are going out to work. And at Hope Academy, when we're looking at the younger ones, the conversation begins there. And I would just continue to encourage our parents to get together, band together, reach out to other stakeholders who have gone the journey before, and who have started to pave the way to continue the conversation that we have been having. So thank you so much. And I celebrate the team at DAME for the work they do to advocate and have their children be able to participate in an equitable manner. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll go ahead and move along to Mr. Keith Simmons.
Yeah, Minister, I'd just like to say, recently when you was in the paper with Mr. Vito O'Brien and the staff at Marine and Ports on the accessibility sensitivity training. That training is not just for persons in the service industry. It's for everyone. And looking at speaking to the team to see if that can be crunched a little bit, where persons can gain continuing education units from it, and maybe a lot more people will sign up for that training. It's really good training. It came out of the National Tourism Plan Accessibility Working Group. Of you were the chairman of it, and information came from a lot of areas, and a lot of people put a lot of work into that. So I think if people will sign up for that, they'll be surprised what they can learn from it, and it will help individuals and organizations. So I hope that program continues for a while. COVID pushed it back, but nevertheless, we finally got it out, and I hope Davida and Judy and the guys can continue it.
Absolutely, that's some great information to share, Keith, and reminding our community that you can take advantage of that training, which is being run through the Bermuda Tourism Authority, um, in helping our community to understand accessibility a lot better. So that is accessibility sensitivity training being done through Bermuda Tourism Authority. You can give them a call so that you can have access to that training. And we'll go right along with Sarah. Do you have any closing comments? You're on mute.
One day I will get it right. Just to say thank you, Minister, for this convening. It's really an honor to gather with everyone that's represented. Bermuda has no shortage of extraordinary advocates, and I think advocating for and enforcing disability inclusion is the norm for any country aspiring to be a just and inclusive society. So we certainly have work to do, asking the question of who is missing, who is not present, and why, is fundamental to taking steps to ensure that we actually change the so-called mainstream, what is comfortable, what is familiar, and really fight for the rights of all of our society to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And Alicia, do you have any closing comments?
Yes, I do. I would like to say thank you for giving me this opportunity to be on this panel. I know, Minister, and thank you, other panelists. I know, Minister, you and I have been having plenty of conversations pertaining to a lot of things that was discussed tonight. Ms. Shelley, thank you very much. I'm working myself with a person who's visually impaired, and I understand what you were saying, and a lot of work has to be done in that area also in around our community where Braille is concerned, because that is what we are teaching our children in school. I am glad that this is happening because of a lot of our parents, which I've been in the education system for 28 years, have had a lot of questions, have asked a lot of questions as if, where can I go? What can be done? Now that this has been on, they know who to contact and where to go. And I would say once again, thank you. But Bermuda, we have a lot of work to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia Zul. And we'll go right along to Thea Ferbert.
Thank you, Minister, for having me as a part of the panel. I definitely enjoyed tonight. One thing rings true, that there are a lot of passionate people in Bermuda that are fighting for those with disabilities. A lot of them are on this panel, and a lot of them are watching. We have the ability to make change in our country. We have the ability to move the pendulum to the side, move ourselves forward, so that those generations coming behind us have more opportunities than the generations that came ahead. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share, and let's continue to move the shoe forward.
Absolutely. I want to take the opportunity to apologize to the community of the deaf for not having an interpreter on with us this evening. However, this recording is being supported on YouTube, and there is closed caption that will be available. And so let's finish up with Sherry with closing remarks.
Awesome. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. um, Again, thank you, Minister Tanay, for inviting me and to all of my awesome co-panelists. This is a comprehensive issue that is going to require a comprehensive, collaborative, and collective response. And there are so many layers along the way that there's absolutely no one entity that can accomplish this all by themselves. And so this conversation tonight actually makes me so hopeful. I can't wait to be home again because we have an agenda that we want to continue to push forward. And if anyone that had questions that would like for some of those questions to be answered and want to reach out directly to Inspire Bermuda, you can just send us an email at inspirebermuda@mail, not Gmail, inspirebermuda@mail.com. And if it's any way I can help, then I'll answer those questions. And I just want to also say that as we move forward and as we're thinking about what this looks like, our little babies are where we're going to start. Because if we can get them going the way that we want them to go, if they're living with an exceptionality, then by the time they come into adulthood, they will be ready and rearing to go, self-sustaining individuals in our island. So I just want to acknowledge the little children and just pray that as we move forward, we can implement strategies that are going to respond, incentivize our paras so that they have the skill that they need in order, incentivize Bermudians to go overseas and gain degrees in vocational rehabilitation so that they can come back and Bermudians can be the one that's training other Bermudians with exceptionalities so that they can go into the workforce at the highest levels, because we can, right? I am, and so you can. And so I thank you again, Minister, for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. I do want to take this opportunity to thank all of our panelists this evening. You're definitely powerhouses in the area of disabilities, and there are many other persons out there as well who have advocated, who have fought, who have struggled for some things. And, that fight will have to continue. I always believe there's always something for us to improve upon. And so, while we may get better at something, there is always something else we can get better at. So I do want to thank our panelists, and again, everyone who's watching this evening, thank you for engaging. If there are any questions for us, please reach out to us at axus@gov.bm. We are also interested in persons who are willing to assist us with this journey forward. And again, that email is axus@gov.bm. I want to send a special shout out to all of our community who's making a difference in the lives of anyone with a disability. I just want to say hello and continue to encourage you, because I know it can get very challenging and tough at times, but continue to be encouraged. And so we will also continue with this conversation. Like I said, I want to continue to bring this to the forefront, particularly this platform. It's very important where we will endeavor to have at least 4 of these discussions within the year. I think it's very important because we have to work on that awareness and engagement and that connection with our community. So again, thank you to all the trailblazers that are out there, and
Yes.
have a good evening. Is there have an awesome evening. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Minister. We do want to remind the public, if you're interested in reaching out to the Human Rights Commission, please email humanrights@gov.bm, or you can call 295-5859. So we want to thank our panel tonight, Sherry Lynn Lilly, We have Keith Simmons, Sarah Clifford, Thea Furbert, Margaret Phillips, Alicia Zool, and of course, we have Minister Tanae Furbert, who's led the panel tonight. An excellent discussion, the first of many. I want to wish our public, our audience, those listening, watching, have a great evening. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.